To speak of Jerusalem in the year 33 AD is to speak of the intersection between the finite and the infinite, yet we frequently lose the finite in our pursuit of the eternal. There is a profound danger in sanitizing history to the point where the city of David becomes a mere stage for a theological play, a static backdrop of white limestone and golden light. We have allowed our imagination to be captured by stained glass and Renaissance paintings, forgetting that the Jerusalem of the first century was a crowded, loud, dusty, and intellectually volatile urban center. When we ignore the unknown reality of daily common life in that specific year, we inadvertently thin the reality of the incarnation itself. If Christ walked among us, he walked on streets that smelled of wood smoke, animal hide, and open drainage. He spoke to people who were worried about the price of grain, the weight of Roman taxation, and the shifting political alliances of the Sanhedrin. To understand the work of 33 AD, we must first understand the world that surrounded it, stripping away the layers of mystical fog to reveal a city at the height of its complexity and its contradictions. There is a common confusion that Jerusalem was a quiet place of solemn prayer, populated entirely by monks and mystics. This is a historical failure. Jerusalem in 33 AD was a geopolitical juggernaut, a city that functioned as the spiritual and economic engine of the Jewish world. During the festivals, its population would swell from perhaps 80,000 to hundreds of thousands, creating an infrastructure crisis that defined the daily experience of every resident. The hidden truth of common life in Jerusalem was not found in the silence of the sanctuary, but in the cacophony of the upper city and the lower city. It was a place of extreme socioeconomic disparity, where the palatial villas of the priestly aristocracy looked down upon the cramped, multi-story insulae of the working class. When we look at the manuscripts and the archaeological remains, we see a society that was under immense pressure, a people trying to maintain their covenantal identity while living under the shadow of a Roman garrison that was always watching from the Antonia fortress. To grasp the depth of this daily reality, we must analyze the foundation of the city's economy. The temple was not just a house of prayer, it was the central bank, the primary employer, and the destination for an international network of trade. The daily work of Jerusalem was the maintenance of the sacrificial system, which required a massive logistical operation. Imagine the thousands of sheep being driven through the sheep gate, the vendors in the royal stoa changing currencies from across the Mediterranean, and the craftsmen in the Tyropoeon Valley producing the vessels and textiles needed for the liturgy. The common life was one of constant movement and transaction. The theological implication here is profound. The sacred was embedded in the secular. There was no separation between the holy and the mundane. For the average Jerusalemite, the smoke of the morning sacrifice was both a spiritual comfort and a literal part of the atmosphere they breathed while going about their business in the markets. The language of the streets in 33 AD was itself a battlefield of identity. While the liturgy was conducted in Hebrew, the common tongue was Aramaic, and the language of commerce and administration was Greek. Latin would have been heard in the barracks and on the proclamations of the prefect. This linguistic layering tells us that Jerusalem was not an isolated enclave, but a cosmopolitan center of the ancient world. The reality of daily life involved navigating these different worlds. A shopkeeper in the lower market might argue with a Roman soldier in broken Greek, discuss the Torah in Aramaic with a neighbor, and read a Hebrew inscription on a coin. This complexity is what the Bible doesn't explicitly describe, yet it is the air that every person mentioned in the Gospels breathed. To ignore this is to miss the intellectual demanding nature of being a believer in that era. They were a people living at the crossroads of empires, constantly forced to define who they were in relation to the pagan world around them. We must also consider the physical experience of the city. Jerusalem was a city of stone and dust. The construction projects of Herod the Great had transformed it into a marble marvel, but the common streets remained narrow, winding, and steep. The topography of Jerusalem required a physical exertion that we, in our sedentary age, can hardly fathom. Walking from the Pool of Siloam in the south to the Temple Mount in the north was a climb that reflected the spiritual ascent of the pilgrims. The daily common life was one of physical endurance. People carried their water from the communal pools. They bought their food daily because preservation was limited, and they lived in close proximity to their neighbors. This fostered a community that was intensely social and perpetually observant. Nothing was private. The news of a miracle worker from Galilee or a confrontation in the temple courts would spread through the alleyways with a speed that rivaled modern technology. Theologically, the common life of 33 AD is the theater in which the drama of redemption was performed. When we speak of the Last Supper, we often focus on the elements, but we must also remember the setting, a rented room in a crowded city during a high-stakes festival. The tension in the air was palpable. The Roman authorities were on high alert for any sign of insurrection, and the religious leaders were desperate to maintain the fragile peace that protected their status. The unknown reality is that for the average person, 33 AD was a year of intense anxiety. They were caught between the promise of a coming kingdom and the reality of an occupying power. The common life was a life of waiting. When we read the texts with this historical lens, we see that the teachings of Christ were not abstract philosophies. They were direct answers to the crushing weight of the daily struggle. A shallow faith cannot carry a heavy life, and life in 33 AD Jerusalem was undeniably heavy. Historically, the role of women and children in the daily life of the city is often left in the shadows. While the public squares were dominated by men, the internal life of the household was the domain of the women. The kitchen, the loom, and the courtyard were the spaces where the traditions were passed down and where the resilience of the community was forged. The daily work of preparing food, grinding grain, baking bread, tending to the small garden plots within the city walls, was a sacred rhythm. The children would have played in the streets, hearing the debates of the rabbis and the commands of the soldiers. This was the environment that shaped the first generation of Christians. They were not raised in a vacuum. They were raised in a city that was a pressure cooker of religious and political fervor. The reality of 33 AD was that every child in Jerusalem knew the stakes of their faith before they were old enough to speak. We must analyze the specific reality of the Roman presence. The 10th Legion was not a distant abstraction. Their soldiers were a constant visible reminder of the city's subjugation. Their armor clattered on the pavement of the Cardo, and their standards were a provocation to the Jewish heart. The common life involved a sophisticated level of resistance and adaptation. People knew how to navigate the Roman legal system, how to pay the census tax while maintaining their allegiance to God, and how to avoid the notice of the guards. This was a sophisticated urban existence. The hidden truth is that Jerusalem was a city of survivors. They had lived through sieges, famines, and civil wars, and they approached the events of 33 AD with a historical memory that made them cautious and demanding. They did not accept claims easily. When the apostles began to preach, they were speaking to a population that had seen it all and was not easily swayed by sensationalism. The deep analysis of the common life also reveals the importance of the ritual baths, or the mikvaot, which were found throughout the city. Purity was not just a religious concept, it was a daily habit. Before entering the temple, before a feast, even after certain daily interactions, the Jerusalemite would descend into the cold water to emerge ritually clean. This physical act of purification was a constant reminder of the holiness required to stand before God. The reality of 33 AD was a life governed by these boundaries. The kitchen, the market, and the street were all mapped out by the laws of clean and unclean. This intellectual and spiritual discipline is what gave the Jewish people their strength, but it also created the tension that Christ addressed when he spoke of the purity of the heart. To understand the actual life of the city is to understand why his message was so revolutionary. He was speaking into a world that had perfected the external and was starving for the internal. The common life of Jerusalem was also defined by the rhythms of the sun and the seasons. Without artificial light, the city lived by the natural day. The morning sacrifice began the day, and the evening sacrifice concluded it. The night was a time of danger and quiet, broken only by the watchmen on the walls. The theology of the light of the world takes on a different weight when you realize how precious light was in a first-century city. The darkness of the crucifixion at midday was not just a symbolic event. It was a terrifying disruption of the most basic reality of daily life. For a city that functioned entirely by the sun, that darkness was a cosmic declaration that the order of the world had been fundamentally broken. The common person standing in the street would have felt that darkness in their bones, a physical manifestation of a spiritual crisis. Furthermore, we must look at the geography of the surrounding villages like Bethany and Bethphage. These were the suburbs that supported the city, providing the produce and the lodging for the overflowing crowds. The daily common life of 33 AD involved a constant flow between the urban center and the rural outskirts. Christ himself utilized this rhythm, teaching in the city by day and retreating to the Mount of Olives or Bethany by night. This movement reflects the tension between the public proclamation and the private reflection. The city was the place of confrontation. The outskirts were the place of communion. The reality of the first-century believer was this dual existence, navigating the pressures of the crowd while seeking the peace of the Father. In our modern study of the Bible, we often skip the mundane details of the text, but the manuscripts are filled with them. The mention of a water carrier, the gate, the porch, or the upper room are all coordinates of a specific reality. These are not mere stage directions. They are the anchors of history. The unknown reality of 33 AD is that the gospel happened in a place that was remarkably similar to our own urban centers in its complexity and its chaos. People were trying to find meaning in a world that felt out of their control. They were looking for a truth that was more than a slogan. Theology is not cold when it burns with the truth of a life actually lived in the dust of Jerusalem. We must think carefully if we want to believe faithfully, and that thinking begins with a respect for the historical particulars of the world God chose to enter. I want to pause and ask you, the viewer, to consider how often you have sanitized the life of Christ. Do you see Jerusalem as a holy museum or as a living, breathing city? The maturity of our faith is measured by our willingness to embrace the humanity of the biblical world. If we cannot imagine the smells of the marketplace or the weight of the Roman tax, we cannot fully appreciate the grace that was poured out in that specific time and place. The daily common life of 33 AD is the proof that God does not hide from the messiness of our existence. He enters into it. He walked the same uneven stones, breathed the same dusty air, and felt the same heat of the Judean sun. This is the reality that sustains us, a God who is not distant, but who is intimately acquainted with the reality of our lives. The historical expansion of the Jerusalem narrative after 33 AD is a testament to the city's endurance. Even after the destruction of 70 AD, the memory of the city in its peak year remained the blueprint for the Christian imagination. Yet for those who lived through it, the year 33 was not a memory, it was a challenge. They were the ones who had to decide if the man on the cross was indeed the King of Israel. They had to make that decision while the Roman guards walked by and while the temple sacrifices continued. The hidden truth is that faith is always a decision made in the middle of a busy life. It is never made in a vacuum. It is made at the table, in the market, and at the gate. We must also be intellectually honest about the archaeological record of Jerusalem. For centuries, we only had the texts, but the shovel has revealed a city that matches the biblical descriptions with startling precision. The mansions of the priests, the shops along the street, the massive stones of the temple platform, all of these things have been uncovered, proving that the common life described in the Gospels was grounded in a tangible reality. The unknown reality is being made known, one layer of dirt at a time. However, our faith should not depend on the next discovery. Our faith is built on the witness of those who lived that reality and were so transformed by it that they were willing to die for it. They didn't die for a myth. They died for something they had seen with their own eyes and touched with their own hands in the streets of their own city. The doctrine of the Incarnation is the ultimate takeaway from the study of Jerusalem's common life. The fact that the Son of God lived in a specific city at a specific time is the most shocking discovery of all. It tells us that our daily work matters. It tells us that our common lives are the stage for God's extraordinary grace. The hidden truth is that there is no part of our human experience that is outside the reach of the gospel. If Christ can redeem Jerusalem in 33 AD, a city of corruption, occupation, and religious externalism, then he can redeem any city and any life. The theology of 33 AD is a theology of presence. It is a reminder that God is with us in the dust, in the crowd, and in the struggle. As we look back at 33 AD, we see a mirror of our own world. We see the same tensions, the same anxieties, and the same search for truth. The unknown reality of Jerusalem is that it was not so different from our own cities. The heart of the Jerusalemite was the same as the heart of the modern man. We all need a Savior who can meet us where we are. The work of Christ in 33 AD was a public act performed in the sight of the world to address the universal problem of the human soul. On the cross, he became the bridge between the holy city and the heavenly city, offering us a citizenship that can never be taken away. This is the ultimate hidden truth that the daily life of Jerusalem points toward. I encourage you to leave your reflections in the comments. How does a deeper understanding of the historical reality of Jerusalem change your perspective on the Gospels? Does it make the story feel more distant or more intimate? These are the conversations that help us move from a shallow faith to a mature thinking conviction. We are here to seek the truth, and the truth is always found in the details. Scripture deserves more than slogans. It deserves our careful, disciplined attention. Let us be a people who are not afraid of the history, for the history is the ground upon which our faith is built. The year 33 AD may be 2 millennia behind us, but its reality is still the center of our world. The city of Jerusalem stands as a monument to the faithfulness of God and the rebellion of man. It warns us that we can be surrounded by the sacred and still miss the Savior. It tells us that our rituals are empty without a heart of surrender. Let us move forward with a sense of responsibility to the truth. We are the inheritors of this history, and we must be the ones who pass it on with integrity and depth. We are the salt of the earth, and our savor is found in our commitment to the reality of the gospel in our own daily lives. I invite you to subscribe and continue this study of the intellectual and historical foundations of our faith. There is so much more to explore about the world of the Bible, the lives of the early Christians, and the theology that has shaped our civilization. We will continue to seek the truth with reverence and with rigor. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your willingness to think deeply. May you walk through the streets of your own life with the same awareness of God's presence that the first disciples felt in the streets of Jerusalem. The ancient work continues, and the call is to follow the one who is the way, the truth, and the life. The intellectual rigor required to inhabit the world of 33 AD is not just about facts. It is about the courage to see the gospel as a historical reality. The manuscripts are clear, the archaeology is solid, and the spiritual implications are eternal. Let us not be a people who are easily swayed by the unknown reality of sensations and secrets, but a people who are grounded in the revealed truth of the Scriptures. The city of Jerusalem in 33 AD was a place of shadows and light, but the light has conquered the shadows. Let us live in that light, and let our lives reflect the holiness of the God who entered our history to save our souls. In the final analysis, the story of Jerusalem is a story about the grace of God. He is present in the daily bread, He is present in the common cup, and He is present in the ordinary street. The hidden truth is that there is no place where He is not. Even in the heart of a city that rejected Him, His love was the standard by which all things were measured. May we be found in that love, and may our lives be a testament to the grace that found us in the middle of our own daily common lives. This is the reality of our faith, a faith that is as old as the stones of the temple and as fresh as the morning mercies of our God. The significance of 33 AD is found in its ability to bring us back to the reality of who we are and who God is. If the Creator of the universe could walk the streets of a crowded city, then there is no limit to His humility and His love. Let us invest our lives in that truth, serving the King with reverence and with awe, but also with a joy that transcends the pressures of our modern world. The ancient work is finished, the record is written, and the call is to wisdom. Let us be wise, let us be faithful, and let us be mature in our understanding of the world that Christ redeemed.